They guided wagons, crossed burning deserts, saved strangers, and carved their place in TV history. But behind the dust and heroism, their real lives and final days were far more fragile. Sudden heart attacks, silent battles with illness, quiet retirements, and heartbreaking downfalls shaped endings nothing like the heroes they played. Let's uncover their stories and honor the legacy they left behind. Frank McGrath as Charlie Wooster. Frank McGrath played Charlie Wooster, the optimistic, white-bearded cook who kept the Wagon families fed and laughing in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was 54 years old. Across 8 seasons, he became the heartbeat of the journey, a constant presence in every storm and every mile of the trail. Few viewers ever imagined how much pain hid behind his gentle grin. Benjamin Franklin McGrath was born on February 2, 1903, in Mound City, Missouri. His life defined by grit long before television gave him a face millions would recognize. His marriage to Libby Key Bushlin was a sanctuary from the chaos of a career built on dangerous stunt work, a partnership strengthened by raising her son, Quay Casey Dillon, whom he treated as his own. Yet decades of horse falls, drag sequences, and high-impact scenes left him with chronic back pain and lingering respiratory strain. Injuries documented in production reports from films like The Searchers, 1956, where he performed 3 major stunt falls despite an earlier spinal fracture. These wounds shaped his days more than any script ever could. As he aged, the effects deepened, tightening chest pains, shortness of breath, and sleepless nights that even Libby noticed were worsening. Still, he pushed forward, clinging to work on Fort Apache and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon because the industry finally recognized his reliability, placing him in more than 200 projects during his lifetime. The emotional and physical toll left him increasingly fragile. He died suddenly of a heart attack on May 13, 1967, at only 64, collapsing in Beverly Hills just 2 years after the final wagon rolled. His estimated net worth of $500,000, largely from his wagon train salary and accumulated stunt wages, reflected the only financial stability he ever achieved. Frank McGrath was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, the same cemetery that holds legends he once worked beside. Terry Wilson as Bill Hawks. Terry Wilson played Bill Hawks, the loyal, steadfast assistant trailmaster who held the wagon line together in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was 34 years old. His calm authority and physical strength shaped the show's identity across all 8 seasons, making him one of its most dependable pillars. However, that strength reflected a lifetime of hardship. Born George William Newman, Jr., on September 3, 1923, in Huntington Park, California, Wilson entered adulthood through the U.S. Marine Corps, serving from 1943 to 1946 during World War II. His marriage to Mary Ann Kramer gave him 3 children and decades of unwavering companionship, yet she also witnessed the long-term effects of his stunt career: bruised ribs, damaged knees, and chronic joint pain from doubling for John Wayne in films like Rio Grande, 1950. He often returned home limping or breathless, injuries documented by studio medics who repeatedly warned him his body was absorbing trauma faster than it could heal. As time passed, subtle signs of heart disease crept in, tightening across his chest, fatigue even during short walks, and nights when Mary Ann said he would wake gasping. Still, he kept working, appearing in Escape from Fort Bravo, 1953, The Virginian, Hondo, and more than 35 television programs, proof of a man determined to honor every job even as his stamina faded. The financial strain of post-Wagon Train typecasting pushed him toward real estate and the risky Dude Ranch project, a move he described to friends as "my last big gamble," hoping it would secure his family's future. Terry Wilson died on March 30, 1999, at age 75, from chronic ischemic heart disease, passing away quietly in Canoga Park as his strength finally gave out. His net worth of about $500,000 came from decades of punishing physical labor and later property ventures. Modest for a man who helped build an entire era of Western television. He was buried beside his wife at Pierce Brothers Valley Oaks Memorial Park, leaving behind a legacy carried in the dust of every Western trail he once rode for real. John McIntyre as Christopher Hale. John McIntyre played Christopher Hale, the steady, grieving trailmaster who guided the wagons after Seth Adams, in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was about 52 years old. He became the soft-spoken spine of the later seasons, his presence grounding every crisis with a weathered dignity. But behind that calm exterior was a man quietly losing a lifelong battle with his own lungs. And to understand the weight he carried, we must step into the life that shaped him long before the camera ever rolled. John Herrick McIntyre was born on June 27, 1907, in Spokane, Washington, later building a life of unwavering devotion with his wife of 56 years, actress Jeanette Nolan. Their marriage, bound by art and endurance, produced 2 children, Holly and Tim. Yet fate struck cruelly when Tim died in 1986 from complications of heart disease. That loss crushed McIntyre privately, even as he continued working. His health was already fragile. Decades of heavy smoking and constant exposure to dust on Western sets had scarred his lungs, gradually forcing him to rely on oxygen between takes during the early 1980s. His quiet suffering contrasted sharply with the strength of his performances in films like Psycho, 1960, where he played the sheriff, and in Disney's The Rescuers, 1977, where he lent his voice to the gentle cat Rufus. Jeanette often joined him on screen, together appearing in The Virginian, The Fugitive, and even The Love Boat, their partnership becoming one of Hollywood's rare constants. But off-camera, he struggled with worsening emphysema, a disease spelled out starkly in his medical records, declining lung capacity, chronic fatigue, and breathlessness that worsened every winter, even as he tried to continue voiceover work that had once been effortless. John McIntyre died on January 30th, 1991, at age 83, from lung cancer and emphysema at St. Luke's Hospital in Pasadena. His estimated net worth of about $5 million reflected a lifetime of steady character work, narration, and television roles spanning more than 65 films. He was cremated and laid to rest beside his son, a final reunion for a father who never stopped grieving the child he lost too soon. Robert Horton as Flint McCullough. Robert Horton played Flint McCullough, the fearless, sharp-eyed scout who rode ahead of the wagons to protect them, in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was 33 years old. His charm and intensity made him one of the show's earliest icons, carrying the series through 5 seasons and 188 episodes. But fame came at a steep emotional price, and the man audiences adored was wrestling with battles far more personal than any Western ambush. Meade Howard Horton, Jr., born July 29, 1924, in Los Angeles, lived a life punctuated by turbulent relationships and the relentless pressure to escape typecasting. His first 2 marriages, to Mary Catherine Job and actress Barbara Ruick, ended in divorce, each leaving him emotionally bruised and distrustful of Hollywood romance. Stability finally came with his 3rd wife, Marilyn Bradley, whom he married in 1960 and remained devoted to until his death. Yet even in that sanctuary, Horton battled private exhaustion. A career split between acting and singing, frequent travel, and chronic stress from sudden fame. Stress he once admitted, "made home feel like a place I visited, not lived." The strain intensified as he fought to break free from the cowboy image, pushing himself into musical theater, concerts, and television roles like 77 Sunset Strip and A Man Called Shenandoah. He earned a Western Heritage Award, but behind the scenes, colleagues remembered a man who often rehearsed until his voice cracked, determined to prove he was more than a saddle and a hat. By the 1980s, he was quietly dealing with mounting health issues, including fatigue and mobility problems, worsened by the injuries he had accumulated throughout decades of performing and touring. Still, he continued making appearances until age 85, when he announced his retirement, citing the physical toll of travel. Robert Horton died on March 9, 2016, at age 91 in Los Angeles, after suffering complications from a fall the previous year. His estimated net worth of around $3 million came from a lifetime of acting, touring, and music royalties, earned not through blockbuster fame, but through relentless work and a voice that audiences never forgot. He left behind no children, only a legacy carved into the American West and a final resting place in the quiet city he first called home. Ward Bond, as Major Seth Adams. Ward Bond played Major Seth Adams, the stern but fiercely loyal trailmaster who commanded the wagons with grit and fire. In Wagon Train, 1957, when he was 54 years old. He became the soul of the early seasons, a towering presence whose authority shaped the entire show. Yet few viewers knew how violently his personal demons battled beneath that commanding exterior. Wardle Edwin Bond, born April 9, 1903 in Denver, Colorado, lived a life marked by political fury, failed marriages, and a body ravaged by alcohol. His first marriage to Doris Sellers Childs collapsed in 1944 under the pressure of his unpredictable temper and erratic career, and his second marriage to Mary Louise Myers, though steadier, could not soften the internal storms he carried. Bond drank heavily, often arriving on set irritable, breathless, and flushed. Several cast members later recalled confrontations triggered by alcohol-related mood swings. His clashes with co-star Robert Horton over top billing were well documented, including one heated dispute reported by crew members in 1958 that halted filming for nearly an hour. Despite his turmoil, Bond remained a towering Hollywood figure, appearing in more than 200 films and forming lifelong creative bonds with John Ford and John Wayne. But his health declined sharply. Persistent chest tightness, dizziness, and coughing fits became common, especially during the third and fourth seasons of Wagon Train. Crew accounts noted he often needed to rest between takes, the strain of long shooting days pushing his heart to its limits. Even so, he continued appearing in major films like The Searchers, 1956, and maintained a presence in classics such as It's a Wonderful Life, 1946. His work ethic masking a heart under growing distress. Ward Bond died on November 5, 1960, at just 57 years old after a massive heart attack in Dallas, collapsing in his hotel room before he could be rushed to emergency care. His estimated net worth of $500,000 came from decades of relentless, punishing work across film and television. He was mourned by John Wayne, who delivered his eulogy, and laid to rest with the weight of a legacy built from both brilliance and turmoil. Robert Fuller as Cooper Smith. Robert Fuller played Cooper Smith, the sharp, quick-thinking scout who carried the final years of the Wagon Train with quiet intensity in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was 30 years old. Across 52 episodes, he became the face of the show's final chapter, a youthful anchor stepping into a world already defined by giants. But behind that confident stride was a man who had spent years fighting typecasting, heartbreak, and the pressure of replacing a beloved star. Born Leonard Leroy Lee on July 29, 1933, in Troy, New York, Fuller entered adulthood through fractured family ties and the loneliness of early independence. His first marriage to Patricia Lyon in 1962 eventually unraveled, leaving him with 3 children and the emotional aftermath of a relationship eroded by Hollywood instability. Then came a deeper wound, Lyon's death from cancer in 1994, a loss that left him shaken long after their divorce. His second marriage to actress Jennifer Savage in 2001 brought lasting comfort, but Fuller carried private fears about aging, career decline, and the pressure of inheriting roles once belonging to close friend Robert Horton. Decades of acting came with their own physical and emotional toll. Series like Laramie and Emergency demanded long hours and high stress. Fuller worked through fatigue, vocal strain, and recurring back pain aggravated by years of riding and stunt work. His role as Dr. Kelly Brackett in Emergency, 1972 to 1979, added another layer: the psychological weight of portraying near-constant life and death scenarios. Awards such as the Western Heritage Award honored his resilience, yet personal accounts reveal a man who often wondered whether Hollywood still wanted him as he aged. In 2025, Robert Fuller is 92 years old, living quietly on his horse ranch in Texas, surrounded by the land and animals that helped soften the noise of his earlier life. His estimated net worth of $2 million comes from decades of steady acting work and ranching investments, the product of a career built not on overnight stardom, but on endurance. Though retired, he remains a beloved figure at Western festivals, a living reminder of the final breaths of the TV cowboy era. Denny Miller as Duke Shannon. Denny Miller played Duke Shannon, the towering, soft-hearted scout who carried both the muscle and melancholy of the trail in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was 27 years old. Across 104 episodes, he became the youthful force that steadied the series during its transition years. But behind that strong frame stood a man quietly fighting disappointment, typecasting, and a body that would one day betray him. Dennis Lynn Miller, born April 25, 1934 in Bloomington, Indiana, lived a life defined by unexpected turns. First a basketball player at UCLA, then an actor by accident after a chance discovery on Sunset Boulevard. His first marriage to Kit Smythe ended under the strain of financial instability and a career that never gave him the breakthrough he hoped for. His second marriage to Nancy Miller brought stability, yet ALS's early symptoms, muscle twitches, fatigue, trouble lifting items, began shadowing him long before diagnosis. He once admitted in an interview that he feared becoming a man viewers recognized but Hollywood forgot. A fear sharpened after his brief but haunting stint as the first blonde Tarzan in Tarzan, the Ape Man, 1959. As the years passed, guest roles on Gilligan's Island, The Brady Bunch, Hawaii Five-0, and over 200 more appearances kept him visible but never delivered lasting artistic recognition. The typecasting he suffered from Tarzan followed him for decades, limiting him mostly to rugged, physical characters, even as his own body began to weaken. When he published his autobiography, Didn't You Used to Be? What's His Name? He described those years as a lifelong audition I never finished. His efforts to reinvent himself, even writing a book on obesity titled Toxic Waste, revealed a man searching for purpose beyond the screen. Denny Miller was diagnosed with ALS in January 2014, a disease that quickly stripped him of mobility and speech, leaving him emotionally battered despite the unwavering care of his wife Nancy. He died on September 9, 2014, at age 80 in Las Vegas. His estimated net worth of around $1 million came from a lifetime of consistent, if under-recognized, television work. He left behind no awards, only the memory of a gentle giant who fought his final battle with a dignity the cameras never captured. Morgan Woodward as Ciel. Morgan Woodward played Ciel, the rugged, sharp-featured frontier man whose presence brought danger and tension to every scene, in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was 32 years old. His guest roles carried a cold fire, a quiet menace that made him unforgettable even in brief appearances. Audiences felt uneasy when he stepped into frame, sensing storms behind his steady gaze. Born Thomas Morgan Woodward on September 16, 1925 in Fort Worth, Texas, he carried the discipline of a military man long before he became an actor. His years in the Army Air Forces during World War II, and later in the Air Force during the Korean War, hardened him and deepened the emotional range he later brought to Western outlaws and lawmen. Yet colleagues often remarked that off-screen he was gentle, thoughtful, far more vulnerable than his steel-eyed villains suggested. As his career grew, the burden of typecasting weighed heavily. Woodward appeared 16 times on Gunsmoke, each as a different man, usually tortured, broken, or dangerous. His iconic turn as the silent, terrifying boss Godfrey in Cool Hand Luke, 1967, proved both a triumph and a trap. Hollywood decided he was born to play cruelty. The emotional toll pushed him toward exhaustion, even as roles in The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, Star Trek, and Dallas kept his name alive. He continued working because he feared stopping. Morgan Woodward died on February 22, 2019, at age 93 at his home in Hollywood Hills. His estimated $2 million net worth reflected a lifetime of relentless work, not luxury. He was buried quietly, far from the bright lights that once demanded so much of him. Dan Duryea as Sam Race. Dan Duryea played Sam Race, the sharp-tongued, conflicted drifter who carried danger in his silence, in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was 50 years old. Across 7 early-season guest episodes, he brought a raw, emotional volatility that made his villains unforgettable. His presence was brief, but powerful, reminding viewers that not every man on the trail carried hope. And the turmoil he portrayed on screen was far quieter in his real life. Born January 23, 1907, in White Plains, New York, Dan Duryea spent decades wrestling with the pressure of a career that typecast him as cinema's charming heel. His marriage to Helen Donahue, lasting from 1932 until her death in 1962, survived waves of emotional strain fueled by his alcoholism and demanding Hollywood schedule. Behind the sneer and sharp voice that studios adored, he hid chronic anxiety and depression, worsened by the physical toll of portraying violent, tormented men in films like The Little Foxes, 1941, and Scarlet Street, 1945. Even at the height of his fame, he admitted privately that the cruelty of his characters sometimes followed him home like a shadow he could not shake. As his career moved from Broadway to Hollywood and later into television, the roles grew darker while the opportunities slowly diminished. Duryea fought against being locked into villain roles, yet audiences and producers wanted him exactly that way: lean, dangerous, unpredictable. His work in Winchester 73, 1950, playing the sadistic Waco Johnny Dean, cemented his image so strongly that escaping it became nearly impossible. The stress eroded his health and his spirit. Dan Duryea died on June 7, 1968, at age 61 in Hollywood after a battle with leukemia, just 1 year after losing his wife. He was laid to rest at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills. His estimated net worth of around $1 million reflected a lifetime of steady work across stage, film noir, and westerns, though never the peace he quietly longed for. Michael Burns as Barnaby West. Michael Burns played Barnaby West, the observant, lonely orphan who grew into his own courage beside the pioneers, in Wagon Train, 1957, when he was just 14 years old. Across 78 episodes, he became the emotional center of the show's later seasons, a quiet reminder of innocence struggling to survive a harsh frontier. But when childhood fame collides with adulthood, the scars don't disappear, and his life's turning point came long after he left the saddle behind. Michael Thornton Burns, born December 30, 1947, in Sacramento, California, carried the weight of dual expectations: perform on set, excel in school, and pretend none of it hurt. His parents pushed him toward opportunity, but the long shooting days, lines to memorize, and public scrutiny left him exhausted and withdrawn. While he avoided the scandals that haunt many child actors, he privately struggled with anxiety, academic pressure, and a persistent fear that acting had stolen pieces of his youth he could never reclaim. His eventual shift toward academia was not escape. It was survival. His second life began with books rather than scripts. Burns earned his degrees at UCLA and later Yale, writing acclaimed historical works such as Dreyfus, A Family Affair, 1789 to 1945, praised by the New York Times for its elemental human drama. He spent 2 decades teaching history at Mount Holyoke College, with colleagues noting his precision and intensity, traits shaped by years of performance. His marriage to Elizabeth Topham Kennan, former college president, grounded him emotionally, helping him rebuild a stability he once lacked. Even then, he admitted in interviews that traces of his childhood fame followed him like a shadow I stopped trying to outrun. In 2025, Michael Burns is 78 years old, living quietly on a restored Kentucky horse estate where he dedicates his days to historic preservation and thoroughbred breeding. His estimated net worth of around $1 million comes from decades of academic work, book royalties, and careful stewardship of the farm he and his wife rebuilt. Though he long stepped away from Hollywood, the memory of Barnaby West lingers. Roger Mobley as Michael Roger Mobley played Michael, the frightened but sharp-eyed frontier boy whose innocence softened the dangers of the trail in Wagon Train, 1960, when he was just 11 years old. Though he appeared only as a guest, his quiet intensity left a mark far larger than his screen time. That fleeting role would become the last calm moment before his life veered into duty, war, and battles. And the path from child star to soldier was far harsher than anyone imagined. Born January 16, 1949, in Evansville, Indiana, Roger Lance Mobley rose quickly from local talent shows to national television. Yet the pressure of constant work and the weight of supporting a large family pushed him into adulthood too soon. His marriage to Sherry Barkley Mobley, beginning in 1968, became his only anchor, lasting through the chaos of sudden fame, the collapse of his childhood career, and the trauma that followed him home from Vietnam. Diagnosed with PTSD after serving with the Green Berets, he privately struggled with the violence he had witnessed, even as he built a new life in Texas. His early roles in Fury, 1955 to 1960, and Disney's Gallagher series had made him beloved, but the boy America adored returned from war as someone quieter, older, changed. After 9 intense years in Hollywood and more than 118 screen appearances, Mobley left acting forever when he was drafted at 18, trading studio lights for Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, and the jungles of Southeast Asia. The shift was brutal. When he finally came home, he discovered he had saved only $6,000 from an entire childhood on screen. Joining the Beaumont Police Department, he faced new dangers, new strain, and the emotional exhaustion of a job that demanded constant vigilance. Yet through every chapter, he clung to faith, eventually becoming a minister and rebuilding a sense of purpose he feared he had lost. As of 2025, Roger Mobley is 76 years old, living a quiet life in Texas with his wife of nearly 6 decades, surrounded by 3 children, 12 grandchildren, and a great-grandchild who knows him not as a star or a soldier, but as a survivor. His estimated $1 million net worth reflects a life rebuilt through service, discipline, and resilience rather than fame. And though Hollywood remembers him as the boy who once ran alongside horses and heroes, his real legacy lies in the battles he fought long after the cameras stopped. And now, after hearing the untold endings behind these unforgettable faces, which Wagon Train actor's story surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we uncover more hidden Hollywood stories you were never meant to forget.